Some tyrants put such a large mark in the history books that they get a whole chapter dedicated to themselves. Well, in this case, these emperors have not yet finished telling their story.
I'm the man, I got the plan. When it hits the fan, do all I can, do all I can.
Hello pranksters, welcome back to another deck review, the place you go in search of a new deck or to find out if that one guy at locals is playing a viable strategy. Today is the day we tackle the leaders of old. Today, we talk about monarchs. But before we get into that, don't forget to go down to that description at the end of the video to check out all of the links to the Have a Cardcast, my social media, other channels I'm involved in like the Coalition of Scrubs and Team Chaos stream, a playlist for more deck reviews, and finally the chapters of this video are down there as well. Now with that behind us, let's jump into the breakdown of this particular strategy. For those that are unaware of this strategy and its goals, I shall state them simply. Monarchs are a deck with the central game plan to get their colossal overlords on the field and give off such a dominating presence that it entirely prevents the opposing forces to muster the strength to confront them. Continuing on from that, we should move on in normal deck review fashion to discuss the pros and cons of the Monarch type. Yes, I spent way too long to put that together. These crowned heads boast their own version of a trade-in, using their own spells and traps and sending them to the graveyard to refill their hand with new resources, effectively lowering the overall card count of the deck. Pantheism, the card in question, can also use itself in the graveyard to provide the player with even more assets to supply their schemes. Preventing the adversaries from even summoning monsters, at least from the extra deck, is another method they use in order to achieve victory. That combined with the Mammoth Rulers allows for an opening in which they can strike a deadly blow. Oh, and did I mention these guys can play on the opponent's turn and use their monsters for Monarch tributes? Yeah, I guess that probably would have been a good thing to bring up. That's all for this section, folks. I believe that is a sign that I need to cover the potential downsides of playing this deck now that we've covered the good parts. Are you looking to build a house? Well, look no further. This deck has enough bricks to build you a whole city. Okay, it may not be that bad, but the odds of Monarchs being able to open a less than mediocre hand are not uncommon. And come on, 2400 baseline attack for a boss monster? Sounds a little 2016 to me, but the average number to beat nowadays is about 2800 to 3000, so granted they can hit that 3200 and a couple of them do start out a little bit higher in attack value, but is that really enough in today's current metagame? The deck space is also so tight that there really is not much room to play different techs to keep the deck fresh and surprise the competition. When everyone already knows what your strategy does and how to combat it, why play it? Well, there are some reasons to want to play this deck, so let's dive in. Pantheism. That's really one of the only things keeping this deck semi-playable. Until it got unlimited on the ban list, this deck really hasn't been seeing any play for quite some time. There are a couple of means to search and engage with plays, but the options to do so are limited, especially when you draw nothing but a hand of big boss monsters that you can't summon without proper sacrifice. Or the reverse can happen, you might see some spells and traps, but no monsters to keep you floating. Relying on floodgates doesn't exactly work for anyone trying to stun their opposition and keep the field in their favor when they don't put anything of value on the field. This deck and consistency just were not meant to intermingle. For that reason, I am giving consistency a 5 out of 10 rating. Have you ever seen a group of fired up individuals who present themselves as such a large threat up until a small threat approaches them and their entire rally disperses and ultimately fails? That's the Monarch experience. If you want a deck that can handle disruption or any sort of responses to plays, you're honestly better off looking at Appliancers. Review coming soon, by the way, so stay tuned. With how predictable and telegraphed the entire strategy is due to its years of play, and since nothing about the 2 or 3 plays the deck makes has changed, interrupting this deck at the precise moment needed to stop it is easier now than ever, especially given how much of it is in the format. I honestly never thought I'd see the day that a trap in the works is able to stop behemoths like this right in their tracks. The resistance of Monarchs and their ability to play through this modern format only receives a 4.5 out of 10, a sad score to be true. With a strategy designed around summoning forth sizable crowns with grand assault counts, it would be vastly more effortless to terminate the battle. This would be the contradictory outcome, as the intended focus of the Monarch strategy is to stun the opponent turn after turn as they bombard their foe over time until they can no longer withstand the beating. This presents a problem for the deck, however. If the opponent is ever able to find an opening to strike back, the battle is all but over for the kings and queens. As such, the power of this deck is valued at a measly 7 out of 10, so far the highest score on this list. At least it's got that going for it. Stunning is a term that can describe this deck in that it is hardly stunning at all. While it has cards like Domain allowing you to lock your opponent out of their extra deck plays after a good amount of setup, what causes this to be so lackluster in the modern format is a variety of different things. For one, we already deal with the Buster Lock, which does the same thing as Domain, but much more consistently and is harder to break. But both can be outed by a Cosmic Cyclone, a commonly played card in both main and sideboards. This goes the same for any sort of back for removal, Lightning Storm included. Secondly, many of the top contending strategies are not nearly as reliant on the extra deck anymore with decks like Dinosaurs, Eldritch, Dogmatica, and so on and so forth. They just don't really need the extra deck as much. Stormforth is another form of interruption, allowing you to tribute one of your opponent's monsters for your plays, and even during their turn if you have an Ether in hand as well. The lackluster ability of this combo only makes it useful if you're able to pull it off during your opponent's turn, otherwise you're running a 2-card Kaiju that can be negated before the tribute has even been made. Now, while these pieces of interruption don't sound incredible after I broke them down, they can still have the potential to do a lot, they just lose value with how much effort it takes to deploy them and unlock their full ability. This deck does have other good disruption as well, like Erebus being able to shuffle one random card from the opposing player's hand back into the deck. With that being said, Monarch Disruption will score no higher than 6.5 out of 10 because this disruption pretty much only works going first and doesn't really have any plan for going second to stop a board from being established. A likely part of the reason this deck underperforms in today's Yu-Gi-Oh! Is due to the fact that the playline is so linear and so familiar it is far too simple to make advances against the deck in order to achieve victory. Due to the deck having little to no extra space in the main deck to make moves, and with most versions having no extra deck at all for the Domain Lock, it is extremely difficult to have different playlines to be able to shake things up and surprise an opponent enough to find the finish line. With these notes in mind, I cannot in good conscience give this deck any higher than a 4 out of 10 in flexibility. I wish I could say this deck is one of the more affordable in the format given that it's from a structure deck, but the structure deck is currently sitting at $45 a piece right now, so obviously that is not the way to go to build the strategy. Even looking on TCG Player for buying singles, most of them are right around the $2 range, but honestly a lot of them will add up quickly. So while the deck is still technically affordable, it's not nearly as much as it could be. Under that reasoning, a score of 7.5 out of 10 is fitting for the budget of this deck. Sadly, but not surprisingly, this is the lowest rating I've had to give any deck so far, even out of the other ones I've written so far. For once, appliances are actually better. This deck is not going to do anything more than stir up some fun at locals or at the local dinner table. If you're looking for a blast into the passive Yu-Gi-Oh! Monarchs are a fun option, but other than that, they aren't going to do hardly anything. Well, that is all I have for you guys today on this deck review. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and maybe any decks you'd like to see reviewed in the future. Thank you all so much for your support of my channel. It has been absolutely incredible. If you would like to keep that up, please be sure to check out those links in the description as well as hitting that like and subscribe button. I appreciate you all so much. Thank you again. I really hope to see you in the next one. Remember to have fun and make your move. Peace out.
I'm a love giver.